I've been in organizations as well where staff have actively worked against an AI implementation because they felt it might be used to replace them. And the test audiences loved it. They then released it to the public and they said it was AI generated, and there was a backlash about how it was the worst advert in history and it was awful and it was all in the press. They ended up losing a significant amount of money. I think it's estimated to be about $500 million because the model drifted. If a competitor implements those tools without doing the foundational work, you will overtake them once you've got all of that in place.
This is Connected with Experian, the podcast where data, technology, and human insight come together to power smarter decisions. I'm Waseem Mirza, and today, episode 3, we go further than we've gone before. My guest has views on AI and the creative industries that I find genuinely fascinating. Matthew Blakemore is an award-winning AI strategist, CEO of AI Caramba, a sub-editor on a global AI standard, and he's also maker of AI-generated films nominated at international festivals. He's a tech visionary who sits at the crossroads of enterprise transformation and creative innovation. And today we're asking what transformation actually takes. The landmines, the shortcuts, the things that nobody puts in the white paper. Matthew Blakemore, welcome to Connected with Experian.
Thank you very much. Great to be here.
Matthew, let's set the scene first of all, because transformation is one of those words or buzzwords, if you like, that gets used so freely across boardrooms that it can start to lose its meaning. So let's first of all ground it, if you like. What does successful transformation mean to you in an enterprise sense?
So I think, when it comes to transforming businesses, it's quite easy for companies to think about big changes. Let's implement a large language model, connect it to all of our data, and actually, what I think the best transformations are built on is small, incremental changes. I think the best transformations that I've been part of are where you bring the staff along the journey with you and you manage it effectively, and you don't try and do everything at once. I'm impatient sometimes, I want to do everything. But actually, it's about managing that and being patient with the process. And as I say, bringing the staff along the journey. That's the best way to deliver a good transformation.
And what's the finish line look like to you? And is that even the right way to think about all this now in this day and age? Or has transformation itself become a permanent state of being in our reality now?
I think it is a continuous change. You don't ever get to a point with a transformation where the technology is never going to improve. Many companies, when they were implementing the cloud, they thought maybe that's the end point. And then, of course, we've had all these strides forward with artificial intelligence. We've now got AI agents. And so what it is actually about building an infrastructure where you can constantly build on top of it, where it's a good platform for new technologies to be implemented, where you understand the underlying data that you have available. It's really about setting the foundations for continuous transformation.
Why do you think it is that some organizations, large ones in particular, struggle to modernize?
I think, especially when you've got a lot of historical infrastructure in place, it can seem like a daunting task, because when you've got your data in silos, when you've got lots of different teams using different infrastructure, the idea of streamlining that can be, first of all, it looks like a huge sum of money and a massive amount of time to do it. And so many companies try and kind of have workarounds to it, plug things into their existing systems as much as they can. But actually, sometimes investing in getting that infrastructure right, taking the time to do it properly, means that you're set for the future. Because as we just spoke about, you don't reach a final endpoint with a transformation. If you've structured things correctly, you should build your infrastructure to actually be capable of incorporating new technologies as and when they emerge.
I mean, it is an enormous complexity involved. And the question is, for a leader, where do they begin?
Big challenge. It's not simple, obviously, when you've got all of these things being thrown at you, AI agents, large language models. It's very easy, as I say, to be caught up in the hype. And actually, I think that the best advice I can give to a leader is to take a step back and to think from a foundational point of view. So how can I get this organization into a position where implementing new technology is easy for us? Because quite often the older historical infrastructure is not built for that. But if you can get the right infrastructure in place so that you can easily implement and add on and try new things, have sandboxes for testing new technologies, and then bring it into the organization, that's where the gold is.
So data intelligence is going to be critical, and getting a handle on all the disparate data an organization has.
Absolutely. And actually, honestly, when organizations go through that process, you often find that there are new monetary opportunities or new revenue opportunities from the data that they uncover. Because once you optimize your data, you can start thinking about it very differently, and you can really see what's on the table. A lot of organizations don't realize the value of some of the data they have.
All right, so let's pivot now to the human side of all this, because no business can really hope to fulfill its aims without focusing on the very people that it sets out to serve.
Yes.
So how are customer expectations now evolving around all this? Now people want to be the custodians of their own data.
They do, yes.
And they want to control where it goes and how.
Absolutely. I mean, consumers are increasingly aware of the data that companies hold on them. It's so vital if you want to build that trust and maintain that trust with your customers, that you really are making them aware of how you're using their data, and of course within the European Union and UK, making sure that it's quite obvious you're complying with the regulations that are out there around data. And I know that there's a framework around agents that's been currently worked on. I think it's called Know Your Agent. And so there's lots of interesting moves in this space to try and bring more transparency to those customers that are so vital for businesses.
Of course, there are existing ways that people can take their data. They can export their data from one competitor to another. Quite rudimentary ways to do it through cloud services. It all goes back down to their organization of data in the first place. If that isn't right, the foundations aren't there.
Yes.
Well, the AI house of cards can literally fall down.
Absolutely. You're spot on. I mean, when it comes to governance and transparency and the data that is so crucial to these AI projects, as we've touched on in the transformation piece, if you don't get the foundation right on any of those components, the whole thing can collapse, because you can lose customers because they don't trust you anymore. Potentially you run into challenges with the models, because if you don't understand the data, you don't understand what's going on, then you have suboptimal outputs. And so it's really important, as we've said before, to get the foundations right on all of this.
Because everybody wants that sort of really ultra personalized experience, whether it's watching streaming content at home or accessing content for learning in a business. I mean, how can you square that circle where people get what they want, but at the end of the day, the guardrails have still been taken care of?
When it comes to recommendation engines and things like that, people have become so used to Amazon being able to suggest multiple types of socks. If you're looking for a particular new set of socks, you can have every sock on earth presented to you in an email. They're used to that, and so consumers are increasingly used to that sort of service. And if you then can't deliver that, or if you deliver that without being transparent about the fact that you're using their data to actually provide that service, it can cause issues of trust, and it can cause issues that can negatively affect the business. Because if we take the Cambridge Analytica example, right? Cambridge Analytica used people's data from Facebook to effectively send adverts to them to influence their political persuasion. And people weren't made aware of that. And that actually was a massive breach of trust. And so for companies, I think they need to look at what happened there, because obviously the fall of Cambridge Analytica, and when it came out what they did, the public were incredibly angry. And so I think companies want to avoid that level of anger towards them. And it's very easy to do that. Be transparent, be clear about what your intentions are, and say, you know what, we're going to use this data to create a better service for you. And people will generally be happy for that.
And far from being a historical point with Cambridge Analytica, the example that you mentioned, just this summer, in fact, a report by Experian mentioned that only 17% of consumers surveyed would allow AI to manage their travel bookings.
Yes.
And only 12% of consumers would trust AI to handle financial services transactions.
I mean, so that's a very interesting research, isn't it? And it goes to show that there are some things consumers are very comfortable with AI doing. Maybe that's making a recommendation for you on Netflix based on what you previously watched. But when it comes to more complex things, people are a bit hesitant. And I remember actually working on autonomous vehicles, which was early 2010s. And the autonomous vehicle companies found that adding smiley faces internally to the vehicles made people more inclined to use them. And so it was quite fascinating, that research, because maybe, it's just that AI at this stage, people are quite scared of it in terms of what it's capable of doing. Maybe in the future we'll become more comfortable with it. But I think it's moved so fast, and we hear of the horror stories of where it goes wrong, that people may be slightly scared of giving it too much control over their daily lives, such as, you say, booking holidays and things like that, and actually, being very careful about when and where they use it.
I have to say that I've had a very positive experience myself lately using, I won't mention the name of the brand, but my bank gave me access to an AI tool, and I was able to square up a discrepancy in terms of loyalty points that I'd accrued over a particular hotel booking. And I managed to get it to give me all what was due. And it did that without passing me through to a customer service agent. Now, a situation like that is probably the holy grail.
Yeah, it absolutely is. But then, I think
it's here now.
I think with these customer service bots and things that people can communicate with, it's very hit and miss, because some companies invest more than others. Some are very logic based, and if you've got a logic based AI chatbot, it can be quite limited in what it can do. And some are based on LLMs. But actually, what we've seen is some of the earlier implementations of these didn't have the security around them required, or the governance required. We had an issue of an airline where a customer was trying to negotiate with the chatbot, and it said that they should get a full refund of their flights or something equivalent to that. And they were able to actually take that airline to court and get that money because the chatbot had been communicating on behalf of the company. It just highlights the importance of getting governance right, but also thinking about the security aspects and how it communicates with the public.
So you've worked on one of the biggest AI standards around, and it's fair to say it's a global benchmark now for AI governance in a staggering number of countries. Just talk to us briefly about what that is.
Sure.
And how that's moved the needle.
So, I got involved in AI standards largely because of the Cambridge Analytica scandal. And I was concerned about how AI might be used if the governance wasn't there, and if companies didn't know how to use it responsibly. And so standards, it's worth noting, are not legal requirements. They are best practice for businesses. So businesses can choose to adopt standards, and we recommend they do, but they don't have to. And so what the standards bodies are is really a group of experts that come together from around the world. So you've got different representatives in all the different territories. And we work on standards to help guide businesses. And when I joined the AI team from the UK's standard body, which was the British Standards Institute, it became clear when we looked at the ISO standards that there was a real gap for an AI data lifecycle standard. A lot of the other AI standards referred to an AI data lifecycle, but it was inconsistent in what that was. And as someone from a business background as well, it became clear that, as a business leader, if I had not known anything about AI, it would be very difficult for me to have looked at those other standards and said, okay, yeah, I know how to implement that, because I wouldn't have understood what an AI data lifecycle was or how to implement one in best practice. And so I worked with 4 other experts, and we spent 5 years actually working on that standard. We spoke to expert teams from around the world. And finally, we were able to get that standard approved, the AI data lifecycle standard, and it became foundational to a lot of the other AI standards that are now in existence. One of the other AI standards, actually, that people may have heard of is the AI system standard, which is 42001 for anyone watching. That standard, actually, you can now certify against. It's a complex thing to certify against. You have to go through a particular process to do so. But you can now, as a board, if you want to, get your company certified to say that you're implementing your AI systems effectively and responsibly.
So in terms of the time that you say it took to get that standard out there,
yes, yeah.
Are things going to have to speed up given the pace of change with AI?
I think it's one of those things where the current processes, whether that be in governance, whether that be in standards bodies, it takes a lot of time to get these things out there and to get them optimized. Now, what we need to try and do, obviously, certainly from a government perspective, is speed that process up a little bit, because governments are dealing with so many things at the moment that the AI and the speed of change of AI has really continuously caused them issues. If we think about, the scandal with X, where people could generate images of anyone with their clothes removed, for example. It took our government quite a while to implement legislation around that to prevent that happening in future. And so, they're trying to work at pace, they're trying to work at speed, but we're constantly playing catch up at the moment. And what I would love to see in the future is a proactive approach to legislation rather than a reactive approach. And right now, the reactive approach is a problem, because even if you work at a faster pace, you're constantly trying to assess the tools that are already in existence. Whereas actually, what has made me feel slightly better is the fact that Anthropic have almost encouraged governments to take a proactive approach in legislation. And I hope other AI companies follow suit by giving them access to their new model in advance, so they can look at it and they can think about what legislation they need to truly control these AI systems effectively.
So in terms of the strong foundation for data and what it feels like metaphorically, I mean, would you agree that without a data layer that's the very underpinning of all of this, AI is essentially flying blind at the moment?
If we go back in time to some of the first recruitment AI tools, Amazon built a recruitment tool, and it had learnt from the data of the other human recruiters in the organization, but they hadn't optimized the data. They hadn't really checked the data for biases and all that sort of stuff. And so the AI model that Amazon implemented initially for recruitment, it actually had biases built in and amplified from the staff that had been working there. And I think sometimes actually one of the human weaknesses is we can look at AI and we can go, that AI is biased, and we can see the issues with that AI. But actually, when you've got a human team and the human team have biases, we're far less focused on the biases of human beings than we are on the biases of the technology. And yet we are training the technology on data from human beings, which do hold inherent biases. And so I think we need to scrutinize ourselves more in organizations to make sure that the data we're feeding into these models doesn't have those sort of damaging biases. If we don't get that right, then the AI will end up being blamed, but also you won't deal with the challenges within your organization, actually, and the human biases you may not previously have been aware of. Because it can be uncomfortable for companies when they look at that data and they see that for maybe a decade or 2 decades, there have been biases in what they've been doing that they weren't aware of.
Are enough conversations about that being had right now?
I think not, no, because it's really uncomfortable. It's really uncomfortable. And that's why you will always see the AI blamed and not the people who created the data behind it being blamed. It's very hard for organizations to admit that they have, in the process of optimizing their data, uncovered biases that have existed in their organization for decades.
Mm-hmm. What role do data foundations play in making AI scalable? And what are versus those still stuck in experimentation mode, do you think?
Data foundations, as we've touched on for the transformation piece as well, are absolutely pivotal to getting the most out of AI models, whether that be a basic machine learning tool or the more complex large language models. If you get the foundations right, you can do incredible things. I mean, we've seen Morgan Stanley create a database of 100,000 documents, which now can be accessed through its large language model solution. So they've actually been able to, because they optimized that data and they made it available in one place, they were able to provide really up-to-date, clear information for their staff. And so when you get it right, it can have big impacts. However, when you get it wrong, then it opens the door for other things. I mean, we've seen obviously companies like Zillow, for example. Zillow are a company that were developed to buy houses at certain prices and sell them for more. Effectively, that was their business model. And they built an AI tool or an algorithm to support them in that process. The problem was that when the market shifted, because they didn't have the right governance in place around the model drifted. And for those on the listening to the podcast who don't know what drift is, it's when an AI model is trained on a certain market scenario or a certain scenario, and then something fundamentally shifts and the model isn't prepared for it. It hasn't been trained on that. It doesn't understand what that is. The algorithm itself then started making decisions or at least advising incorrectly. And they ended up losing a significant amount of money. I think it's estimated to be about $500 million because the model drifted. And what that shows is that if you don't get the governance right around this, you can run into real issues. The recent case, I think it was only a few weeks ago.
Exactly.
With, I believe it's Pocket OS, was it?
That's it.
Where, they had an AI agent, and within 9 seconds, it was able to delete all of their production database and their work.
A nightmare scenario for any business out there watching and listening to this.
Absolutely, and it reminded me very much of for any of your viewers who've watched the Silicon Valley drama, and this series had a moment in there where one of the developers had created an AI to support them with coding, and that may sound familiar for people who are out there today using Claude Code or OpenAI's solutions. And he created this AI, and he'd set it a task to delete all of the errors, and it deleted all of the code. And when the CEO got angry at him, he said, well, technically the AI has done what I asked it to because it's deleted all the errors. It just deleted everything. And so, there are things that we do need to think about. It's almost like when you've got a genie from a lamp and it grants you 3 wishes. Sometimes, as we've seen in films, those wishes can have unintended consequences. We need to start thinking about agentic AI and AI like that as well, because if you get the prompt wrong, if you get the task slightly wrong, and you're relying so heavily on AI, it can have very, very detrimental effects.
Are we just at the tip of the iceberg here in terms of more of those kind of moments?
I think so, but also what I would say is a lot of companies have experienced things like that, but they wouldn't necessarily make them public. Them making this case public was actually very valuable as a warning to others who are using these AI agents, because don't get me wrong, AI agents are incredibly valuable if used correctly, and they can see, if you've got your data foundation right, they can vastly improve your business. There's lots of opportunities for them. But if you don't get the governance right and you don't understand the limitations and the challenges and the potential risks, then you do open yourself up to the sort of thing that happens to Pocket OS.
So is it correct that you introduced your, for want of a better phrase, a snakes and ladders
Yes.
AI framework earlier on in 2026?
Yeah.
And Yeah, it seems like a really fascinating way to sort of get to grips visually this idea, the pitfalls and the accelerators in this. But what are the biggest snakes right now in your mind, and that companies keep landing on?
When it comes to optimizing your data, it's not sexy. And things like assessing AI readiness in an organization, again, not a sexy task. Whereas, an AI agent, let's implement that. That's sexy. And it's about skipping steps. And if you skip the steps, you might see some benefits still from an AI agent. You might have a particular task that you can set it up with and go and run with immediately. But you're going to miss loads of other opportunities. One of the things that can go wrong, as we've already covered in this, is when you don't bring staff along the journey with you. Because I've been in organizations as well where staff have actively worked against an AI implementation because they felt it might be used to replace them. There's things like that where, staff might even deliberately mess up the data that they are producing if they know that AI is being trained on it to replace them. And that's a very human thing as well, because you want to protect your well-being, you want to protect your job. And so there's these sort of things where they are snakes because organizations don't think about them, and it can cause real problems.
Where do you see the biggest opportunities for enterprise over the next few years in that sort of short term? And which of the current trends do you think are genuinely really transformative?
If you have the expertise and the governance in place, AI agents can take on a lot more of the admin tasks and things that you potentially previously had to have staff working on, that now you can kind of refocus those staff's time on the more complex things, on the things that probably interest those staff more, to be honest, than completing these tasks that are repetitive and not as interesting for them. Of course, when it comes to stuff like research as well, these agents are fantastic. But what we've seen is actually jobs have shifted now. So whereas before it was a difficult job for a researcher to go out and find all the different sources, now their job is verifying the sources, that come through all of these research tasks. So AI agents, huge opportunity for companies. The second thing is, I think so many companies that I speak to and so many companies that I've come across have still not actually got the benefits out of the more historical versions of AI, so machine learning, deep learning, and that's because they still haven't really got to grips with their data. And so I think if they can get to grips with their data over the next couple of years, then opportunities such as implementing a machine learning model for a particular task you have internally really could streamline a lot of things. I've seen in logistics, for example, there are companies that are still not using machine learning for tasks that it really lends itself to. With the lower cost associated with those types of AI, I think we are going to see a lot more of that. And then the final thing is when it comes to analytics. And I think there's a lot of opportunities to analyze your organization using the new tools that are out there, the more sophisticated AI solutions. Analyze various aspects of your company, work out where the real pain points are, in a way that you've not had visibility of that in the past. And these tools are becoming more and more complex. There are companies that are building these solutions that you can implement in your business. And I do think that is really a good support for any of the C-level to really understand their business in a lot more detail.
With this general trend that we're seeing now, and if we do follow through on some of the ideals that people speak about, then the nature of work will surely change. And what's left for humanity?
In some studies, they found that though many jobs have been lost because of the new AI models, and that's largely been junior and administrative roles, they've also created roughly the same number of jobs, but in more complex areas, managing these models, the governance aspects of them. There are going to be new jobs created by these new models. My concern is what happens when we get to AGI, which is artificial general intelligence, and some people call it ASI, artificial superintelligence.
The holy grail of AI.
Which is the holy grail, exactly.
Also we're led to believe.
Yeah. And I'm not sure we can get there with the current large language model approach. But once companies do find a way to get there, and a lot of companies like OpenAI have received a lot of investment because of the fact that they're working towards this goal. If we get to that point where AI can be more creative than a human being or replicate human creativity.
You really believe that that's possible?
If we get to that point, we're certainly not at that point at this point. But if we get to that point where the human in the loop is no longer an essential part of an AI work stream, I think that becomes very problematic.
And I guess this sort of leads naturally to my next point, because you yourself are an AI creative, for want of a better expression.
Yeah.
And your work has won nods at many international film festivals.
Yeah.
Just talk to us briefly about what you've done there.
Sure. So I was one of the first to kind of create AI films, short films from the models back in the day when they could only produce 1 or 2 seconds of movement. And it used to take months to create about a 3-minute film because of the fact that you had to have so many thousands of clips.
And a huge budget.
And a huge budget, to actually generate the content. These days, obviously, now you can generate a minute or more of video with some of the latest models. We've seen Hollywood push back because there was a video that came out from someone using the seed dance model of Tom Cruise fighting with Brad Pitt, and it brought up loads of issues around IP and whether you can actually, incorporate known celebrities into videos and all that sort of stuff. I also use AI in my music, so I'm a songwriter. I've been a songwriter all my life, and it's been fascinating to see how AI in music has advanced. And one of the things that actually troubles me about AI in music is these new generative models are being treated like they are fundamentally different to what has gone before it. And actually, in the music industry, the majors have been using AI in music for decades. If we look at the artists in the 90s, most of them couldn't sing. I mean, they've used auto-tune, they've used all this stuff. I mean, it's true, though. Like, they're mimed on stage. Top of the Pops used to be full of miming artists. And these days, actually, it's changed. And I think, the art is far less about the aesthetics now, which is good. We've moved forward as a society. But certainly in the 90s, it was all about how you looked more than the music. They've used AI. You've had David Bowie using AI to actually write lyrics back in the day. It was a verbalizer. So, there's been so many different forms of AI that have been used from the 1980s onwards in music. And so many AI tools have been used in production that generative AI in that area almost is the next stage. And what concerns me about music is there's this idea that if you use generative AI in your music, that you are fundamentally less creative. See, I've never used AI for my songwriting, but I do use AI to help me to craft the songs around it. So, when I've got the lyrics, how I mix the music and all that sort of stuff. And I think that's fantastic. I think it gives me a freedom that I didn't previously have. And from someone who's from a socioeconomic background, that's, I was lucky. I wasn't from a lower class background, but equally I wasn't from an upper class either. I wasn't from, super wealthy. I couldn't afford to hire a studio to record my tracks. I maybe was able to do 1 or 2 tracks a year from the cost of it. Now I can create albums, for a fraction of that fee. And that really opens the door for everyone from different socioeconomic backgrounds. And so that's why I think AI can be a democratizing force. It can be a way of actually supporting people from all different types of socioeconomic backgrounds to really advance their craft and be creative. But what we are seeing is a lot of the incumbents trying to control those AI systems. I mean, we've seen the majors with Udio, for example, trying to make it a walled garden so that you can't take your music outside of Udio. And I think that is bad. I think that's really bad. And I don't think it's healthy for these big, powerful incumbents to be controlling the market. And that's it comes back to that point about, having a few very, very wealthy people and no one else being able to break through. And I do worry that is where we're heading.
Now, as a performer myself,
Yeah.
many people might realize that I'm also an actor
Mm.
in a couple of science fiction franchises.
Yes.
Where do you stand on the realization for many in my industry that AI can never really have a soul? It can't feel or make us feel.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. If you ask Claude if it could feel, it may disagree with you. But fundamentally, as humans, yes. I mean, we do have that inherent feeling when we see another human being interacting on stage, whether that's in a theater or on a film or a TV show, we feel connected to them. What I would say is the new AI models are becoming incredibly difficult without, if you're not told that it's AI, to differentiate between a real human and an AI human. And an example of this was the Coca-Cola advert, actually. So Coca-Cola produced an advert, and this was a couple of years ago even. And they ran some tests with test audiences, and they didn't tell them that it was AI generated. And the test audiences loved it, absolutely loved it. And then they then released it to the public, and they said it was AI generated, and there was a backlash about how it was the worst advert in history, and it was awful, and it was all in the press. And I think that shows, there is for sure the public prefer to have, I think, real actors and see real people, but it is an option certainly to use AI generated content in films and things. And what we're seeing with a lot of Hollywood is almost hybrid approach, where maybe scenes that in the past would have cost a fortune to produce, huge explosions, that sort of stuff, they're thinking about, can we use Gen AI here to help with this particular part of the film? Or if there's a scary stunt or something that needs to be done, can we use actually Gen AI to help produce this stunt so that we don't have to do it in real life? And Hollywood would never admit that at the moment. But that's how they're using it. That's how they're thinking about it as well.
Matthew, if you could give one clear, actionable priority to a C-suite leader that's probably tuned into us now, someone who has the mandate but perhaps doesn't know where to even begin around all of this, what would it be?
Aside from bringing me in, I would I would say no. I would say that I think the key really is for them to certainly look at following experts on LinkedIn who have done this before, maybe in their sector. Look for other case studies as well. One of the things that I've been doing a lot of work with over the past few years with Innovate UK is looking at case studies in different sectors to support businesses in different sectors when they're thinking about their own transformational journey. Because if you have case studies to look at, it's just so much easier. It's so much easier. It gives you almost a grounding in how to move forward, and it shows that it's possible. If you are the CEO, be supportive of change, because if you're not supportive of change, your organization, it may survive for the length of your tenure, but then you're not setting it up for the next generation.
So who's doing a good job at the moment? Anything that comes to mind?
I mean, we've got South State Bank as well, who've implemented, a really effective, again, large language model implementation. We've got JP Morgan, who've got so many different AIs in this space, where we've seen them really transform the organization through the use of AI and improved infrastructure. And so I would say that across the financial sector, there are so many case studies.
All right, Matthew, I can't let you go without you doing this quick fire quiz, all right? So let's get to it. Question 1. AI, hype or revolution?
Revolution.
Automation or augmentation?
Augmentation.
Favorite tech tool right now?
Claude.
Data governance, competitive edge or compliance tick box?
Competitive edge.
Okay, one word for the future.
Hope.
And that's the right way to end this episode, I think. Thank you very much. Matthew Blakemore, it's a pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
If you're interested in how data and technology are transforming decision making, you can find more at experian.co.uk. Until next time, stay connected with Experian.